Good morning, friends. I would like to welcome you to the opening convocation of the 2019 spring semester of the Chicago Theological Seminary. Please accept my deepest thanks that you have chosen to be with us as we continue our tradition of excellence and dedication to learning and justice in our world. It is particularly an honor to offer this welcome as I celebrate our first year on this magnificent journey together, a journey to make of this school what God needs for us to be in this world at this time. This journey upon which we join with scores who have gone before is one that seeks to make real the hope that our humanity, when shared with one another, will be a source of joy and celebration. Our part here at CTS in this work of carrying on that vision of hope and furthering that blessing in a broken and wounded world is through the work of the education of leaders for a world that does not yet exist. I offer this welcome also as an invitation. Before us is the invitation of the Spirit of life, which beckons us to new places and new spaces to bear the glad tidings of life and abundance in the midst of the despair so pervasive in many corners of our world. This invitation comes along with the challenge to bring the best of our knowing, the broadest expression of our understanding, and the richest enfleshment of our commitments. So whether it be in your classes, your exchanges with fellow students, exchanges with faculty, staff, or board members, let the passion for justice which the Spirit has kindled in your heart be that which drives you to excellence. Let your affection for the world, which God loves so dearly, be the strength which carries you on to a semester, which will cause human and angel alike to rejoice and scream, "Well done, well done, well done." I welcome you then to this marvelous part of a journey begun long ago but continued on in this semester, a journey onto which the Spirit has beckoned us all, and offer my sincerest prayers that this semester will be one in which you shine in ways that you could not have imagined before. So I simply say welcome and thank you for joining the journey here at CTS, knowing that God is with us, will strengthen us, and will guide us.
400 years ago, enslaved Africans arrived on this land. A year later, in 1620, pilgrims arrived, seeking new opportunities, new life. The circle of life shows us that what was meant to be a time of new life and new opportunity for some was an excursion of death and demise for others. The circle of life acknowledges that there is death and there is life. There is death and there is life. The circle of life acknowledges that there are many who've gone before us. There are those who come behind, and there are some at different points on a familiar path. Convocation, it's calling together, calling towards, to summoning, reminds us of this circle, this cycle of life. At the beginning of each semester, we convene in convocation, where we are called together to listen, to learn, to study, to share. At this midpoint in the academic year, we pause to worship and to wonder. And we are still emerging, and our courses reflect this. New course offerings in administration, courses in death, dying and the dead, courses on preaching, not necessarily so new, but they welcome new professors such as Dr. Reggie Williams to our fold, Dr. Cody Sanders, Dr. Sandra Womack. A course on policing queer bodies and activist theology is being taught by our Director of Theological Field Education, Dr. Kate Lassiter. CTS alum, Dr. Teresa Smallwood, is leading a course on public theology and racial justice. And there are many of you heading to the border during Reading Week. We're happy to welcome almost 30 new students this spring semester. And we are enjoying seeing your faces here in this place, and yes, online. And we hope that you will support your colleagues, Dr. Tony Hoshaw and Ms. Candace Laughinghouse, who will give open house lectures on February the 26th and March 19th, respectively. The Association of Theological Schools has left the building. Our team of evaluators noted our sustained, ongoing assessment process. Yes, we'll have to submit a report in 2023, but we can deal with that. We're grateful for you, our students, to staff, to board members, and our faculty for our work with ATS. Speaking of faculty, Dr. Zachary Moon has a new book in the pipeline, Warriors Between Worlds, as he continues his journey with moral issues. Our board has just approved the promotion of Dr. Bohm Young So to full professor. Join me in congratulating Dr. So. On February the 21st, Dr. Julia Speller will give the Kenneth B. Smith Jr. Lecture honoring the legacy of a former CTS president. And yes, Dr. Ken Stone and Dr. Rachel Mikva are on sabbatical. But returning from a much-deserved sabbatical is today's speaker, Dr. Christophe Ringer. Dr. Ringer is Assistant Professor of Theological Ethics and Society. His research currently focuses on the religious and cultural meanings that sustain and rationalize mass incarceration and other forms of social death in American public life. His own public witness with the Community Renewal Society and the Chicago Bond Fund reflect this work. He is preparing a manuscript which he labels as Necropolitics and Mass Incarceration. Just last year, he was inducted into the Morehouse Collegium of Scholars. Professor Ringer holds a BA from the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, and MDiv and PhD degrees from Vanderbilt University. He is currently working on a book chapter entitled The Boondocks and the Ethics of Black Comic Rage. Professor Ringel will share with us today from research related to this topic, Unholy Sacrifices, the Boondocks, and the theological role of Black comic rage. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are delighted that you responded to the call to gather, and let us ever be mindful of this circle of life.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Clark, and I'm chair of the Board of Trustees. And on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I bring you welcome to the Spring 2019 Convocation. We bring you blessings and are so pleased that you're here. Thank you very much.
Family, will you pray with me? God of grace and mercy, we are grateful. Grateful for this day. Grateful that you raised us up this morning and set us on our way. Grateful for this occasion to celebrate the beginning of a new semester at Chicago Theological Seminary. Grateful for each and every member of this community. Grateful for all that you have done. Grateful for all that you are doing and are yet to do. God, we are grateful, so grateful. And we lift our hearts in praise. Amen. I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I'll pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. It is His will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I'll pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I need you to survive. I need you to survive.
Exodus chapter 32, verses 1 through 8. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us. Who shall go before us? As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Aaron said to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from them, formed it in a mold, and cast an image of a calf. And they said, "There are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt? When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord." They rose early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to revel. The Lord said to Moses, "Go down at once. Your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, have acted perversely. They have been quick to turn aside from the way that I commanded them. They have cast for themselves an image of a calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt.'" The word of the Lord.
Mark, first chapter, verses 1 through 4. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, "Behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight." John appeared baptizing in the wilderness and proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. The word of the Lord.
Good afternoon, CTS. I first want to thank the entire CTS community for the opportunity to enjoy a sabbatical where I can do focused research and writing. And as Dean Crowder already mentioned, I was able to complete my first full-length manuscript, hoping for it to land at a publisher as we speak, and also to begin earnest on a second full-length project called Towards an Africana Public Theology of Human Rights. Often we think of human rights violations as things that happen somewhere overseas, in another country, but often not looking at human rights abuses here in the United States and the relevance of Black religion for that tradition. In addition, I was able to finish an article on James Cone that's forthcoming in the Journal of Africana Religions, and also to work on another project, an edited volume in which an essay appears on religious ethics and comedy. And it's from that article that I want to share with you on today. And this research is situated in thinking about the relationship of public theology that uses the resources of our religious traditions to sustain, cultivate, and correct our public life, and cultural criticism that also interrogates the social agreements and ideological distortions that sustain patterns of social suffering and injustice. This work builds on the work of Black liberation and womanist scholars who have demonstrated the profound value of engaging culture as a resource for theological and ethical reflection in the work of realizing a more just society. As such, I want to examine the limits and potential of the role of satire as a cultural form to serve the theological role of challenging the idolatries of public life. I still find persuasive theologian Ed Farley's account of idolatry as those goods or cultural objects in public life whose existence cannot be questioned or seen as vulnerable or subject to criticism, irony, or humor. They are always on alert to defend and eliminate anything seen as threatening. The presence of idolatry is often manifested in the high cost of human suffering. Satire often serves a role of questioning when our cherished ideals and collective identities appear to take on the character of idols. Satire performs this role by holding up a mirror to who we are, allowing us to see profound injustices, dogmatism, hypocrisy, cultural lapses, and blind spots through the use of humor, or what some have called rhetorical violence. And in the case of the videos we will witness today, satire recruits laughter to address things that are no laughing matter. And the mirror is used to help us see things and among us that we are afraid to look at. However, I want to deepen Farley's account of idolatry and think about satire through the recent currents in what we call affect theory, in order not to just describe idolatries, but to discern the emotional investments that sustain them. Traditionally, the term affect refers to the description of concrete emotional experiences, such as love, hate, envy, gratitude, resentment, guilt, shame, and scorn. The full range of our emotional lives. The history of Christian ethics and moral philosophy has a long engagement with this question under the guise of the moral passions. Many of you are already familiar with this tradition. Many of you have seen children or have children, and you've seen them get into scuffles, and the responsible adult breaks up the two children, and they chastise them and say, "Now I want you to apologize." And the child does something like this: "Sorry." And then the adult says, "No, I want you to apologize again. And this time, I want you to say it like you mean it." In other words, we learn very early on that a good apology has both cognitive content and emotional content in order to be understood as real. Paula Unholy, in her work, The Emotional Politics of Racism, How Feelings Trump Facts in the Era of Color Blindness, says this: "Emotions shape the way people experience their worlds and interactions. They give people's psychic realities and ideological convictions their sense of realness. Emotions cinch or unravel people's sense of individual group identity. They help motivate actions and inactions, often in unconscious or preconscious reflexive ways. Although they may seem fleeting and incalculable, emotions attached to race and sexuality have their own unique logics of gain and loss. Thus, emotions function much like economies. They have mechanisms of circulation, accumulation, expression, and exchange that give them social currency, cultural legibility, and political power. In particular, affective economies of fear, anxiety, danger, desires, and pleasures can impact our ability to assimilate knowledge and participate in communication. She argues that hegemonic affective economies are those that reproduce structures of racism, nativism, and imperialism in the face of facts and evidence. To challenge such structures of emotional investments, we must engage in cultural practices that can reorganize the way public signs of categories such as race and gender are invested with meaning and challenge the form of public and collective reasoning. Our own culture has grown accustomed to satire through shows such as The Daily Show and The Colbert Report, as expressing deep anger and frustration with the state of our society. However, there's also another distinct marginalization of voices that stand in a tradition known as Black comic rage, a tradition that uses humor to critique American racism. The short shelf life of shows such as Larry Wilmore's The Nightly Show and Robin Thede The Rundown are examples of the difficulty that this tradition often has in finding expression. As many scholars have noted, the historical politics of Black comic rage have become increasingly complex as this tradition increases its access to mainstream audiences beyond the black community. One premier example of this tradition is Aaron Magruder's The Boondocks. Literary scholar Terrence Tucker argues that the series uses militancy and humor to, quote, highlight the presence of white supremacist hegemony in the rhetoric of post-racial that often obscures and discourages frank conversations about race. I agree with Tucker that the Boondocks often resist easy answers and cultural assumptions, and its comedic irreverence makes sure that no one is above critique. However, I want to illuminate the complexities and challenges that even a series like The Boondocks encounters in adequately addressing social suffering, even as it courageously dared to critique R. Kelly and those who defended him in light of accusations of the sexual predation of young black girls. At the center of The Boondocks are 10-year-old Huey Freeman and 8-year-old brother Riley. Huey is the archetypal, conscious knowledge-dropping revolutionary whose youth frustrates his ability to carry out his freedom dreams. Likewise, Riley is the face of an unexamined racial authenticity, defined by thug life, dedicated to keeping it real. Whether it is the biracial daughter Jasmine's identification with white mainstream ideologies, her straight-laced father, Tom Du Bois' faith in the legal system, the grandfather's imagined participation in the civil rights movement, the self-loathing of Uncle Ruckus, or Huey's embrace of conspiracy theories. Magruder uses their suburban existence to examine the ideological complexities that come with the meaning of race, as it is intertwined with gender and race in the wake of the era of civil rights. Huey and Riley's perspectives are brought into sharp relief in the episode, The Trial of R. Kelly. In this first clip, we'll show two clips. We see the first representation of the public conflicts over R. Kelly's trial for child molestation and child pornography that center around the infamous video made by Kelly where he urinates on an underage girl. In the second clip, we witness the response of Huey to the failure of the prosecution to find Kelly guilty, even after prosecutor Tom Du Bois presents photos, eyewitness accounts, DNA evidence, and a video with R. Kelly facing the camera and even taking a phone call where he gives out his Social Security number.
We're here at the R. Kelly trial, where there are a handful of angry protesters making their voices heard. These are scholars, activists, pillars of the African-American community, and they are outraged. And we're just going to head over here to the R. Kelly supporters, where it's quite the festive event. And you are...
Hey!
Now, why did you come out here to support R. Kelly?
'Cause he good.
And what about those protesters over there who say he's crossed the line?
Literate ass uppity niggas. All they talk about is reading and eating right. Nobody want to hear all that shit. If I want to get high blood pressure, then nigga, get the curd away from me. If I want to get high blood pressure, then damn it, that's my business.
Let's talk to another R. Kelly supporter. You there, urban youth. Why do you think R. Kelly is innocent?
If I started peeing on you right now, would you A, smile and ask for more, or B, move the hell out the way? But before you answer that, let me ask America. Has Pete ever really hurt anybody? And I want to give a big shout out to my homie, Diva. What's up? Okay, that's enough. Get off me. Get off me, Huey. Free R. Kelly.
Hey, yo. Look, the R. Kelly haters are pressing that little boy.
Free R. Kelly. Free
Get out of here. We know we talking.
You want to hear me? Come on, man.
I knew it would be just a matter of time before violence broke out. It's pandemonium here at the R. Kelly trial. Oh, the humanity!
with you people? Every famous nigga that gets arrested is not Nelson Mandela. Yes, the government conspires to put a lot of innocent black men in jail on fallacious charges. But R. Kelly is not one of those men. We all know the nigga can sing. But what happened to standards? What happened to bare minimums? You a fan of R. Kelly? You want to help R. Kelly? Then get some counseling for R. Kelly. Introduce him to some older women. Hide his camcorder. But don't pretend like the man is a hero. And stop the damn dancing. Act like you got some goddamn sense, people. Damn. Don't playing around here. Boo! Hey, you with the afro. Give it a rest. Beat it. Put the music back on. You stressing me, I did battle with ignorance today, and ignorance won. I admit that I'm often vexed at the behavior of my own people. Yeah, vexed is a good word.
Thank you. In the first clip, we have a group of civil rights leaders and activists, and there are only 3 in number, including the unmistakable likeness of Cornel West. Such a small number implicitly questions the legitimacy and possible paternalism and cultural exceptionalism of black scholars and activists in relationship to the broader community. In the other group, we see the stereotypical images of a large black woman eating a chicken leg while licking her fingers while arguing that her support for R. Kelly is based upon his musical talents. Here, Aaron Magruder is making very clear artistic choices and moral judgments. This binary representation of Huey's people, blacks who embrace the truth, who are the standard bearers of morality, and Riley's people, the black masses who deny truth, embrace ignorance in favor of bodily pleasure and aesthetic satisfaction. This binary representation is also the key to the trial, as in spite of all the arguments, the only thing that matters is Kelly's music, with both the judge and jury swaying to the music, eviscerating what appeared to be a slam dunk case. What I find compelling in the second clip are the images of 2 tapes. One tape featuring R. Kelly being called by name, engaging in the sexual predation of young girls. The other, a cassette tape of Kelly's music. The one tape eerily familiar to images of police brutality, caught on video but failing to go unpunished. And the other, a symbol of the communal and juridical failure to value and protect black young girls. It was philosopher Judith Butler who rightly discerned that racism and sexism do not just give us rival interpretations of what is seen. Rather, they structure the nature of the visible itself. And just as a side note, in this episode, Magruder has the young girl in the video to testify. In the actual case, she did not testify. And here, the judge is imaged as black, but in the actual case, the judge was white. The judge was Vincent Gound, who was also the same judge who rendered the verdict in the Jason Van Dyke case. We can talk about that over lunch. Throughout this episode, Magruder probes deeply the ways in which our ideas of cultural authenticity can be manipulated by those in and outside the black community to benefit certain persons and behaviors. However, Magruder chooses to present Huey's voice as the last word, the summary statement. The Boondocks here offers what I might refer to metaphorically as a split-screen critique. There is a trenchant critique of the embrace of R. Kelly that is explained as a failure of knowledge as well as affect. Unlike Huey, the people are not as culturally or politically woke enough to understand the error of their ways. And moreover, the prosecution's central failure is the inability to appreciate how much black people love R. Kelly. Thus, Magruder actually draws on 2 perennial themes in the history of Christian ethics that account for the response of black people to the trial of R. Kelly: ignorance and wrongly ordered love. Make no mistake, The Boondocks was courageous in challenging the levels of support for Kelly, but its explanation of this support as mere ignorance and disordered loves leaves much to be desired and in many respects is empirically false. The question of black protectionism was the subject of important research by Catherine Russell Brown in her pioneering work, Protecting Our Own, Race, Crime, and African Americans. Russell Brown's work attempts to navigate this curious territory within the black public sphere between interests and collective identification. She examines why there are blacks willing to defend high-profile figures accused of crimes regardless of their actual commitment to the black community. Russell Brown defines black protectionism as, quote, the response by large numbers of the black community to allegations that a famous person has engaged in a criminal act or ethical violation. The response is protective in that it denies, excuses, or minimizes the charges. To be sure, protectionism exists among all social groups. One only has to consider the extraordinary support of politicians such as Roy Moore or the current occupant of the White House. However, Russell Brown's research shows that black protectionism is specifically rooted in our historical response to racial injustice. In addition, Russell Brown documents certain trigger questions that blacks involved that ask in response to accusations, such as, did he commit the offense? Was he set up? Is he the only person who has committed such a crime? Is the accusation part of a larger plot? White respondents only ask one question, did they commit the offense? In contrast to pure ignorance or disordered affections, when placed in larger view of the history of blacks within the American criminal justice system, black protectionism is a complex and dynamic social phenomenon. Through a sophisticated mix of methods, including historical, ethnographic, and an analysis of 34 cases from 1994 to 2004, her research shows the benefits of black protectionism. As currently practiced are one, it fosters group solidarity, the ability to resist society's stereotypes. It provides a form of collective discernment, a weighing and balancing of a person's moral or criminal lapses within the broader context of their life. In addition, black protectionism serves as a critical vehicle to challenge the legitimacy of law and to represent the persistent patterns of racial injustice rooted in American history. However, this social phenomenon is not without its problems. Russell Brown notes that there is often not a concerted effort to require those who have received the benefits of black protectionism to have an obligation towards the community. Also, it is often offered only to those who are famous or those whose social status, or it is not offered to those whose social status offers little protection. However, its major problem, its primary drawback, she argues, is that black protectionism is rarely applied to black women in similar circumstances. Brown then calls for renewed black protectionism that is critical and to address this disparity. The Boondocks episode does have certain aspects of a critical black protectionism, as the moral culpability of R. Kelly is foregrounded, as well as a rigorous questioning of the criteria for who should receive these benefits by Huey. The failure of the episode, however, is that it fundamentally misrepresents black protectionism as solely constituted by the unreflective pursuit of bodily pleasure, racial solidarity without political warrant that trumps all other moral considerations, including the lives of young girls. The black comic rage of the Boondocks, like traditional satire, does hold up a mirror to injustice and critiques destructive patterns in our culture. However, in doing so, it fails to recognize that the subjects of its satirical lens are themselves engaged in complex acts of representation that signify the experience of injustice. This episode renders the actions of blacks in public life irrational and unintelligible, thus supporting long-held ideas that black people lack the mental capacities to participate in a political community. However, I want to argue that there is also a religious dimension to Russell Brown's account that is unexamined and is very much related to the question of affect. Scholars of religion and society have long noted that societies constitute their own sacred objects. Some sacred objects stand in for the community, and they mediate between collective consciousness and the consciousness of individuals, so much so that a representation of a sacred object central to society's identity can operate without consideration of its ongoing usefulness or potential harm. Thus, its authority is spontaneous because its meaning is so deeply woven into the society. In the wake of the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman in February of 2012, and a lack of an arrest by the Sanford Police Department sparked widespread outrage. In addition to the 1.3 million signatures on a Change.org petition, rallies and protests were held across the country to voice outcry over inaction. Two objects emerged as symbols of Trayvon's death throughout the nation, a hoodie and a bag of Skittles. While many Americans participated in these rallies and protests, within the black public sphere, black people in particular wore hoodies in solidarity. Elected officials such as Congressman Bobby Rush wore a hoodie during session. Athletes wore hoodies. Members of congregations wore hoodies. Christophe even preached in a hoodie. Thus, in this moment, the hoodie became a sacred symbol representing issues of ultimate concern, life and death. And in general, it stood in for the precarious nature of black life. Recall the case of Troy Davis, who was executed for killing a police officer in Georgia, even after 7 of the 9 eyewitnesses recanted their statements and drew support of human rights groups from across the world. Even President Jimmy Carter and Pope Benedict begged for a pardon, but the slogan was, "I am Troy Davis." It represented the precarious chances of being accused of a crime that one did not commit. In both cases, there is a spontaneous and religious sacralizing and collective identification with persons that society has disvalued. More specifically, in both cases, black men represent and stand in for black people. The salient point is this: we do not have an example of the death of a black woman serving the same representational role. Black women activists have raised hard questions about the marked difference in response to black men being killed by police and black women. Some scholars have been quick to dismiss such concerns as a vulgar attempt to score points in some profane game of oppression Olympics. I think this is profoundly mistaken. Rather, what such activists are pointing to is what I call a gendered affective disparity within our society's representations of the sacred that structures the responses of black protectionism. As such, the structures of racism and sexism conspire to distort black protectionism in a way that allows for the collective identification with Trayvon Martin and Troy Davis to then be extended to R. Kelly in a way that sacrifices the flourishing of young black girls. And I argue that this is an unholy sacrifice that evidences the movement from collective identification to forms of idolatry. Thus, as an institution here at CTS, this is not only an issue for the black public sphere, but for society in general. As an institution dedicated to the sacred worth of all people in all of their ways of being, we have the dual task to discern and to critique the idolatries and inequities within the sacred that produce unholy sacrifices of human dignity, and to mine the resources of our religious traditions to reconfigure a public sphere that dignifies and not devalues, that discerns instead of disavows, that repents instead of retreats, and sanctifies and does not sacrifice. Thank you so much for your time and your attention.
Let us be in the attitude of prayer. Divine Spirit, Word of truth, light of love, living within. We are vexed. We are tired. And our hearts are prone before you. We are navigating cold and difficult times, a polar vortex constituted of the moneyed, mean-spirited, and powerful, who are indifferent to the suffering, havoc, and death they are causing for the sake of unwanted, metaphorical, actual, and odious walls and the steel slats of prison cells all over the world. While we are chasing the idol of piety, distracted by Super Bowls, and preoccupied with the doings of royals and real housewives, we who also imperfectly love life, who imperfectly love others, who imperfectly love ourselves, and who imperfectly love you, are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. And when we are busy not looking at the things that outrage and enrage us, we are being killed all the day long without so much as commentary. How can we expect you to harbor us when we have not spoken up for those who require shelter, when we have been too afraid or too embarrassed or too stressed or too weary to speak up for ourselves? We are vexed. We are weary. We are desperate. We are prone. We feel impotent. But you have said that we are not. That we are rather more than conquerors, because you first loved us. You gave us life. You gave us light. You gave us yourself. And we are trying to love you back in full. Fill us with your holy fire, so that we may worthily worship you and magnify your holy names whenever, wherever, and in whatever language we call. Teach us how to see you in all our neighbors. Teach us how to love and work for justice for all of them, as well as for ourselves, for earth, for the universe that you are still creating and that you love and sustain by hope. Teach us how to pray and act and rest and pray and act and rest with confidence in your companionship and guiding spirit all the days of our lives. And we pray all these things in your many and glorious names. Amen, Amen, Ashe.
Friends, colleagues, mentors, beloveds near and far, let us be grateful for this day of convocation, and this place where we gather together and put our hearts in front of God and ask for guidance. Loving, divine Creator God, thank you for the grace you provide and the gifts you give. Thank you for this institution, CTS, and all those who teach and guide and inspire us to become leaders for the next, and just as importantly, leaders for the now. Thank you, God, for helping us to go forth into the boondocks of a social and political climate and help us to do our part in creating a more loving, just, and hopeful society. Amen. Please bless the meal that we are about to share with one another, and bless with generosity the hands that prepared it, the ones that showed up and did the work, for we need them. So as we go from this place, let us live our lives as grace for one another. May the Lord our God look upon us, and with God's grace, tell us, at the end of our days, we've done it well. Well done, my beloveds. Well done indeed. Let us go and share each other in peace.